Now, let me introduce you all to our first resource speaker for today, Ms. Shivani Vadva. She is a counseling psychologist, remedial therapist, and trainer by profession. She is also a certified career coach, structure of intellect practitioner, and a phonics master trainer with over 8 years of experience in helping children with special needs. She aims to empower individuals to reach their potential emotionally and academically. As part of her mission to promote the holistic development of children with special needs, she founded an organization, Samarthya, Nurture a Better You. Along with Shivani, we also have Mrs. Smita Tripathi. She is a remedial therapist and special education consultant with 15 years of experience in skill development and teacher training programs in mainstream schools and therapy centers. She tries to orient parents, schools, school administrators, and teachers to promote enhanced acceptance of children with special needs in inclusive school setups. She has extensive experiences in classroom administration, planning, and implementing of student support service department in school. Who better than that to orient us about the importance of setting up an inclusive school support service department? Before I hand over the podium to both the speakers here today, I'd like to let the participant know that the session would be for 2 hours. The session would begin with a presentation followed by a Q&A discussion. While the speakers are sharing their knowledge with us, we would be switching the chat to the host and panelists so that we can all concentrate on the speakers sharing. Wishing you all a happy learning, and I hand over the podium to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Revati. A very good evening to all of you. For today, we'll be taking up to understand how one can set up a student service support department in an inclusive school. Just a moment, we'll share the slide. So before we move on to the topic, we'll do a quick recap as to what was done in the previous session. In the earlier session, we had discussed about the inclusion. How can one school move towards mainstreaming settings? What is inclusion? What are the components of inclusion? How is inclusion different from exclusion, separation, and integration? We had also discussed what are the benefits of an inclusive school setup. For today's session, we'll have a quick overview moving on in depth. So for today, we'll be taking up to help you understand what is a student support services department. What does it do? Who are the core members of the team? What are the features of this department? What is the need and importance? We'll also discuss about how can we set up and successfully run a functional student support service department in an inclusive school. There'll be certain challenges and how can we turn those challenges into opportunities. And now, since a lot of it is happening onto the virtual platform, we'll be also discussing the strategies to support you when it's a virtual learning. Now, to begin with, we look at what is a student support service department. The Student Support Services Department is a department that aims at the functioning of the individuals in a holistic development manner. So this department is responsible for providing support to learners and their related issues. So it could help them to regularize their emotions, manage their behavior, or also improve their skills academically. Moving on. It is a very important part of any inclusive school that focuses on the holistic development of children. This department is the department that connects students, teachers, families, and communities to a major goal, which depends on striving to help children reach their maximum potential. Next, we see that this department majorly is going to help in the, moving on, in the well-being of children and success of all students. So it focuses on the emotional well-being, physical well-being, and the mental well-being of all students. This Student Support Service Department also provides provisions and resources to special needs children. Most importantly, it also helps to eliminate the negative connotation that is usually applied to the term inclusion. So as you can see here, it is actually a hub. So this student support services is a hub where it connects everything. It connects the resources to the special needs student. It connects the services, the therapies. So it is like a hub that helps to bring about the holistic development of children. Moving on, we have a quick poll now. We'll understand how is this department there in a school, how many of you have experienced this department, and what are the challenges you face before we move on into depth. Revati, could you help launch the poll for our participants, please?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just launching the poll.
Sure. So as you can see, there are questions on the screen. So there are questions which I request you to answer by choosing the best option that fits you. So are you a part of an inclusive school? If yes, you would select yes, and if no, you would select no. Inclusive school is a school that caters to children with special needs as well. I can see a lot of answers in the chat box. I request you if you could give me those answers through the poll by selecting the option from the poll questions. Second one is, does your school have a student support services department? Third, do you think it is important to have a student service department in your school? And what are the challenges you might have seen that the school faces in setting up this department?
So we have about mostly half of the participants who've given their response. So I'll request all the participants to take a moment out and respond to these questions. We'll just give them another minute's time now.
Sure.
We'll be closing the poll in another 20 seconds. So participants who have not responded yet can take a minute, a quick brief few seconds, and then respond to the questions. Just closing the poll. Share the results with you, ma'am.
Thank you all participants for your responses. So it shows that majority of you are actually a part of an inclusive school. That's really nice. And then does your school have a student support service department? Okay, it's a 50-50 year. And then moving on, do you think it's important? Yes, most of you, like 98% of you have said that it is. 96, sorry. And then okay, a few of you are unsure because probably you might not be knowing what the department does. So we'll take you through in our presentation for that. And what are the challenges? Okay, lack of support, lack of resources. Most of you feel don't know where to start, and others. Great. So we'll be discussing these in the coming slides. Thank you so much for the participation. So we'll move on now. So let us now look at what is the importance of the student support service department in a school. So basically, this department aims at equalization of opportunities for all students, but majorly for children with special needs. This department promotes an enabling learning environment where it wants to help children to learn the way they want to learn. It promotes services that improves the students' well-being, its overall well-being in different aspects. It allows students with support needs to access all the available resources for their skill development. It provides holistic development of students, and it opposes all kinds of labeling. It helps those in need without negativity. So this department definitely helps children who would be needing the requisite support to develop their potential. Moving on. Now, we look at the core membership of the Student Support Service Department. Who are the members who are a part of this department? We have the school counselors who would be co-members. We have therapists like speech therapists, occupational therapists, or physiotherapists being a part of the department to provide the required services. Then student. Student is actually the heart of the student support service department, a child with special needs or a child who needs certain amount of support to be able to develop more. Then we have special educators who would be helping with the remediation to improve their academic skills. Then the staff with these specialist roles. There are times when coordinators in the school or head of the departments would be required to support this and act as a bridge between the department and the student to give certain permissions. They are a part of the department. Then parents and the guardians play an important role. There are professionals from external agencies. There are times when students would be requiring help from the other professionals outside school. Suppose the school does not have the provision of a speech therapy. So that's when the student would be taking the help of a speech therapist outside school. That becomes an external agency. So the department keeps in the external agency in the loop as well. Then the school management and the representatives. So these are the core members of the student support service department in a school. So now we look into what are the roles of this department. The roles of this department are categorized into three major domains. First one is support and orientation. So they basically create awareness about the different challenges children can face. Then we have screening and identification of children with special needs. And third is providing individualized intervention to support these children. Now we look at each of them in detail. So when we talk about the support and orientation aspect, it's basically conducting sessions, workshop, meetings, and awareness programs for students, teachers, and parents. This department also provides assistance to teachers and staff for effective classroom accommodation of children with special needs. For example, they have identified a child who is finding it difficult to pay attention and sustain on a task for a long while. So this department members will work with the teachers to help the child cope. For example, the seating arrangement of the child would be made closer, or the teacher would be asked to give non-verbal cues. So that kind of assistance is provided by the department for proper accommodation of these children. This department also helps parents and caregivers to support children with special needs by psychoeducating them. This Student Support Service Department also acts as a bridge by facilitating links with external agencies, as we discussed, and it also orients the school management about the importance of catering to children with special needs. So this is the psychoeducation aspect where the department is creating awareness about the different conditions. The next domain it does is the screening and identification. So this department will engage in certain classroom observations, documentation, report making. They use certain checklists and tools to identify individuals who might be facing certain limitations or challenges. This department also conducts informal assessments to identify the current functioning level of the child with special needs. If after doing that, they find the need for the child requiring a formal assessment, they further refer the child to a clinical psychologist. So this is the domain of screening and identification. Next, moving on to the third domain, after they have identified children with special needs, this department, based on their informal assessments, classroom observations, I know the child's level of functioning. They identify the child's unique strengths and the potentials, based on which they design an effective individualized educational plan or an individualized counseling plan to support these children. Based on the IEP or their ICP, they conduct one-on-one sessions or group sessions. There are times the needs of the child differ. Some children would need group session for improving their social skills, or on the other hand, a child who is not able to communicate that well verbally and is slow and is having difficulty with academics and gets distracted with people or children around. So for that child, a one-on-one session would be beneficial. So based on the need, this department would conduct one-on-one or group sessions to facilitate skill development. So they also help in tracking and reporting progress of the child. So once the IEP, that is the Individualized Education Plan, or ICP, that is Individualized Counseling Plan of a child, is made, after that is implemented, it is very important to check its progress as well. So this is also done by the department by speaking to the different stakeholders involved. Moving on. Based on the domains, these are certain features of the department. The department is very flexible. Based on the need of the child, they either take one-on-one sessions or group sessions, and it's mostly catering to individualized teaching, and the major emphasis is on child-centered learning. Children are the core of this department, and this department focuses on the child's strengths and functional skill building. Next, we look into how does this department actually work. It has certain roles, definitely. It has an importance, but how is this department going to function? So, when we look at the pointers of how this department functions, this department engages in observations to plan interventions. So it does certain classroom observations based on which they can plan how the child can be helped. Is it that the child needs to be taken out during a certain academic period because the child is not able to cope during that class? So that is decided based on the observations that the team makes. There are times that this department utilizes leisure periods for skill building. So there are times that there are certain leisure periods that the child would be having. So this department uses those periods to help the child to build on their skill deficits. And they use this teacher support to cater the students in the classroom. Definitely, if the child is finishing the work faster or is engaging in disturbing, so the teacher could be suggested that the child has interest in drawing. We could allow the child to draw, but the condition is the child has to finish the work faster. So with the teacher's support, they cater to the student needs in the classroom. This department reviews and follows up regularly, which helps them to understand the progress the child has made. Also, another important thing it does is conducts parental interactions. Based on parental interactions, we get to know how the child is at the home setting. And then after discussion and knowing how the child is performing at the school level and at the home level, the team members also provide home-based activities that can be of help to the child to improve their skill set. This department also gathers relevant resources. So whatever resources are required for the child to cope with their deficits or to cope with the challenges he or she is facing, those resources are gathered. And this department also maintains documents and records for future references to also monitor how the child is progressing. Major goal of this department is to provide intervention and support to children with special needs. So there are a lot of things that this department does. It can help children to cope with their academic challenges, regularize their emotions, deal with behavioral challenges, any kind of other issues that the child is facing. This department definitely looks into it. Now, there are certain requisites a student support service department needs to have. So these requisites now in detail would be taken up by Smita ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shivani. Shivani just explained the role, features, and the significance of this beautiful department in an inclusive setup. So what I'll be now moving ahead with is how do we actually set up this department in an inclusive setup? Before we understand the basics, one thing that needs to be remembered and recognized is that every school is unique and so are its children. So the school support department of your school, which will be catering to the needs of your children, may look very different from a neighboring school's support department because of this very reason. So let's not forget that, yes, we are working towards one goal, but we definitely look and feel different from each other. Having said that, now I'll take you through the professional requisites of the Student Support Service Department. There's no limit on the team size, but yes, the number of children with special needs in the school, or maybe the variety of challenges that the school is catering to will decide the kind of professionals that the school will choose to hire. So we can just begin with maybe a school counselor, maybe a school special educator, maybe both, or a team bigger than that. Even if it's a small setup, not to worry, we can just begin with a counselor, educator, and move on and hire people as and when needed. Coming to qualification, the qualification should be in line with whichever area the school belongs to. The professionals are expected to hold a master's or a bachelor's degree in their respective field. Along with qualification, a little work experience, maybe even as an intern, in the setup that they desire to work will definitely be helpful. Along with qualifications goes the soft skill. They go hand in hand. So the professionals who are amiable and empathetic definitely have more chances of reaching out to parents and teachers easily. And they also able to bring out the best in children. So definitely one soft skill that should be looked into a professional when they're being hired, or even when one is choosing this as a career. Along with that is being creative. Creativity opens a lot of doors. It helps us think of solutions out of box. It helps us start new opportunities, look at things in a different perspective. As teachers and educators, we understand that creativity is one tool which helps us design lessons, design teaching aids that will help diverse learners. So yes, these soft skills should be considered when the team is being hired. The other requisites are the skill to document and report. Yes, documentation and report making is one important skill that should be looked into the professionals, but yes, it comes with time. So basic documentation and reporting is what one needs to understand. It helps in tracking the growth of the children. Along with that, the professional should be well equipped to conduct workshops, meetings, and other engagement programs, because these workshops, meetings, and engagement programs become the channel to communicate with teachers, parents, students. So they become a medium. So if you're good at it, you definitely can put across your ideas, your agendas really well, and you'll be supported by most of them. The least that expected from them is to work as a team, as in be a team player, believe in each other, definitely cooperate, and non-interference should be the best thing, because at the end of it, we all are working together for the holistic development of the child and see to it that they grow as much as they can. Coming to the resource room setup, this can be left to a person's creativity and imagination. We call it a room, but not necessarily when you begin, you have to have a room. You can begin your intervention, your therapy, if you're in an inclusive setup, right from where, whatever kind of place you're allotted. So don't give up, if you don't have a room or resource room that you can call, you can begin from the library. Maybe you can also begin from, a classroom that's converted into a resource room before or after school hours. You can even begin your sessions in your art room or any corner which is silent. So what you actually have to look for is a corner where you can communicate with the child. The child doesn't get distracted. A place which isn't too noisy. So given an option of a resource room, the school should take care that it isn't in a place which is very noisy. Like this should not be close to a dispersal or area. It shouldn't be close to canteen. Maybe not close to washroom. So because these children definitely have poor or high sensory concerns. So it's good to have a classroom that is quiet so that you can connect with the child easily. Along with that, furniture can be child friendly. It can be multi-purpose. You can also have a little space for storage of records and documents. Even if you don't have space, you can go digital, which is the need of the hour right now. It'll help you save your documents really well, organize them, and maintain them, and can be easily accessed by all the team members from wherever they are. Along with that, storage containers, maybe which can be borrowed from the library or the other rooms, or if there is a budget in the school, go ahead and buy containers that can be easily maintained. Store your teaching aids, your resources, things that you can keep and use them handy, to help you make your sessions interesting and make your children come to you. Decoration, when we say, is the interiors, which is absolutely important for a resource room. But again, like I said, it shouldn't be too loud. It shouldn't be distracting, because you should be the focus and not the background. Use the decor with visual aids that can be looked, when a child comes to your room, it can be easily seen and learned, understood. So this is simple, but like I said, right in the beginning, one doesn't have to wait for a resource room to begin intervention. Wherever you are in whatever kind of a setup, please go ahead and start your intervention. Sooner or later, when you get things, put them in a way that, yes, it makes a lot of sense to all the team members, and it caters to the real goal of the department, which is reaching out to as many students as we can and intervene them. The next is things that we need to keep in the room. Yes, like we know, stationery. It can be your planners. It can be organizers. It can be simple things like pencils, erasers, color pens, even stickers and stamps that your children enjoy. Keep them handy. Worksheets you can have, because if yours is a new school, you can and you've just started with the resource center, you may even need to collect worksheets depending on what is the different area that you are doing intervention on. So keep certain ready to use worksheets printed, or maybe you can make your worksheets and keep them handy so that you can use them during your sessions. It's a great idea to have books related to reading comprehension, creative writing, spelling, grammar, grade appropriate. If not, you can even borrow them from the library. So one doesn't need a big budget for this. It can easily be managed in your school setup, in a mainstream school. Along with that, you can have a simple computer, which can have, you can install basic software programs that will help you make your sessions interesting. You can have different video players and even games, educational games that can help your child focus. If the child is a visual learner, audio, they have that kind of a learning style, this definitely helps as a resource. But if you don't have one, you can definitely take your child to the computer room and plan your session when there's no class in the computer room and help them with these facilities. Along with that, the department can also stack certain games and educational manipulatives like clay, blocks, and the other games, because it becomes an important thing while you're trying to build rapport with the child. And also maybe when you want to give the child a reward in terms of positive reinforcement, you can give them a 5 minutes of play or something during a session in the beginning or the end. The last one is the teaching aids, because we believe in making it child friendly and according to the child. Yes, we'll be having a lot of resources. They can be kept really well in the resource room. Keep things which don't distract the children. Keep them somewhere where you can reach out to and maybe present it to them when you need them. Coming to the documents. Now, we know that documentation is one important part of the resource setup. So today what we will be discussing is certain essential documents that can be maintained by the department. So the people who are getting into schools and who are getting a chance to set up should definitely try and use these departments, because it makes the setup a little formal. As and when I'll be explaining the documents, I will be telling you about the significance of these documents. So today we'll be seeing consent form, case history, referral form, progress evaluation, checklist, and the IP and the ICP. We'll be discussing this. The checklist is something that the department can maintain for the teachers. Basically, the teachers can refer to ready-to-use checklist if they have, maybe spotted a child who needs help. So to be sure, they can first go through the checklist. Maybe they can fill the checklist on the, for the child and see if the child meets most of the parameters, and then maybe make a referral, because this saves a lot of time from both the end, the teachers and the, the department's end. Along with that, the department can maintain certain informal assessment tools ready grade-wise, because when you have a case and it is referred, it's good to have, the informal assessment based on whichever board you're working with, and then use that as a tool to see, yes, what are the problem areas and how you can actually deal with them. With the essential documents, what we will also be seeing today is certain additional documents that can be maintained by the department, like the meeting and the case records. So basically, when you meet a parent, the teacher, or other authorities, and if you have recorded the meeting, as in you've documented it, it becomes a very important source to understand, yes, what were discussed and, what was the conclusion. And taking the further meetings, you can always have your agendas in place and refer to the documents. Along with that, you can have formal assessment reports. So sometimes the, like Shivani highlighted, you may refer a child for an assessment outside with a professional. And if a parent gets that done, you can always keep a copy of this with you, because it helps you plan your goal, your intervention in a better way. And the last one is the exam provision concessions. So these are documents that can be maintained if a child needs certain concessions with the board that the child is, studying. These documents help you communicate with the board. So it becomes an important link between the board and the school. Having said that, you all can also refer to the documents which are available. These documents also will be available online, and there are many other documents. You can modify them as per the need of the department. You can add, delete certain pointers that you think will suit your need. So like we said, I'll be taking you ahead with the sample consent form. Now, why is a consent form important and what role does it play? Consent is a formal way wherein a formal way of, a parent referring to the department saying that, yes, I understand that my child has problem and I agree that the child can come to you for intervention. So the parent fills up the form. The name of the therapist who's going to deal with the child is also mentioned on it, along with the number of sessions that the therapist is going to conduct for the child. So this becomes a formal document wherein the stakeholders sign and yes, agree that the parent agrees and gives a consent for the intervention to begin. The next one is the parent-teacher referral form. Now, parent-teacher referral form is the most important form for the department to function because what is seen is most of the time, for example, a parent comes to the school maybe, during a parent-teachers meeting or maybe meets you somewhere outside and highlights the concern about their child and then maybe forgets and then comes back after few months asking, what happened. Sometimes even teachers, because they have so much work, they see you in the corridor or maybe meet you in the staff room, just talk about the concerns and then, maybe get diverted from the need of the child. So the referral form is a formal way of letting the department know by a parent or the teacher that, yes, my child has concern, okay, and then referring, basically filling up this form and then making a formal referral to the department that please do something about it. Now, what does the referral form have in it is that basic details of the child, as in which grade, date of birth, and the date of referral, because that becomes important. Along with that, the parent or the teacher will highlight the reasons for which they are making the referral. So it can be behavioral reasons or academic reasons. There are quite the familiar ones which are put in the form. Other than this, if there are any other concerns that are noticed by the teacher or the parent, they can definitely write down and then give the details about, share the details about it, maybe later when they meet the therapist or the department. With that, the most important thing is that in this form becomes the time. Since when have they noticed this? See, because these problems cannot be just noticed and maybe they appear and disappear. They have to stay for a period of time to actually become into a referral. Along with that, they will also be signatures of all stakeholders in this form. The next form is the self-referral form. Now, why is a self-referral form important? Is because sometimes children in high school, secondary divisions of the school, have a problem. They want to talk about it, but it becomes very awkward for them to maybe address it to the teacher or maybe even the department, personnel. So they can fill this beautiful form wherein they can write that, yes, give their details and then write, yes, I have a problem, maybe write the reason why they want to, why they need help, okay, give some background about what kind of a problem they are facing so that the department can decide that will it be a counselor or a special educator or maybe some other therapist who will be dealing with the child. So once they state their problem, the reason, and also give us the timeline as in since when they are facing it, the team will collect this referral form and submit it and definitely do something about it. Every referral that's given to the department becomes a case unless and until one has attended to it, the case doesn't shut or close. The next one is the case history. Now, case history is again a beautiful form. It's a detailed form. So this should be, one can genuinely conduct a meeting with the parent, call the parent, inform that, yes, there'll be a meeting wherein we will be sitting together and, taking up certain details about your child. It's important to prepare the parent because there'll be a lot of questions to do with, the background and the other details that you'll be wanting from the parent. Another tip to actually host the case history meeting will be that once you feel maybe you've met the parents once or twice and you have the kind of rapport with the parent, that's when you should call the parent and conduct this meeting. Now, what goes into the case history form is the data, the general information about the child, which will go into the database. Along with that, medical history and educational background. Medical history will highlight that was there any problem, because of which, any medical reason because of which the child has any concern. Is it because of when it comes to educational background, it will help us, understand, is the child the first generation learner, or is it because the child has changed to many schools because of which the child has academic concerns. Along with these areas, there'll also be different, data that needs to be collected to do with birth history, because birth history again becomes important for us to understand if the child had, what kind of a birth was it? Did the child achieve, the other milestones, like the developmental milestone is one of the area. So gross motor skills, fine motor skills, executive skills. These are different things that you will gather from the parent for you to help understand what the concerns are. Along with that, if it's a behavioral referral, you will definitely ask more about the behavior of the child, maybe back home with the others. You will understand how does the child behave in different settings other than the school. You will try and understand the reading skill, writing skill, arithmetic skill, receptive language skill, and expressive skill of the child. So this becomes a long meeting. Be prepared, have patience, and also prepare the parent so that it goes really smooth and well. Before we move on to the sample progress evaluation form, is something which is important, very important, which is the individualized educational plan and individual counseling plan, ICP and IEP. Now, because these are detailed forms and you definitely need the skill and practice to actually, fill the form or design a form for yourself. Ability will be conducting another workshop for the same. So today we won't be looking into the details, but yes, those are important documents that needs to be maintained by the department. The next one is the progress evaluation form, like we said. Now, after you've done the IEP and the ICP and you've started with your therapy, say half yearly or quarterly as the school decides, you will be having a progress report that you'll be making and sharing with the parent. So now the progress and maybe the other therapist too. So now what will be the progress report highlight? It will highlight that yes, the area or the skill that you were working on, what techniques you used, and how much have you achieved the goal. So you have timelines in your mind, but sometimes the child achieves the goal sooner, or maybe they need some more practice and time. So you will make remark of all that. You will also give certain strategies in the progress report. Maybe you can highlight certain strategies for the teachers, maybe for the parents, and also for yourself if you're changing any of the technique that you think isn't working. Same goes for the counseling therapy also. So when the counselors also, after they've made their ICP and they've started their services, they will also make a progress report by the midterm or maybe like towards the end of the term, and they will discuss that yes, these were the goals, and few of them have achieved, few of them they will continue to work with. Maybe in the next term, when you're beginning with a fresh IEP or an ICP, you will take goals from the progress report which were not achieved, and you will add some more new goals and work on the child. So these were certain documents that we've shared with you. Not necessary that if you don't, have hang of any of the document, you cannot begin your therapy or your session. This is easily available online. It's easily available, in different, other platforms. Please use the ones that you think are easy, which you can really understand and you can use as per your need. So now that we've seen the documents, let's move on and understand what are the challenges that one faces while setting up this department in a school. I'm sure most of us are here today to discuss, to understand what are the challenges like, because we all face them. This is true. This is even true for people who are already, working with huge departments in beautiful schools, beautiful inclusive setup. No one forgets their challenges, but every challenge that's fought, it definitely teaches us something. So today what we'll be doing is we'll be seeing challenges, or we'll be discussing the challenges, but also looking into opportunities to how change them, how to change the challenge into opportunities for us. Meanwhile, I'll also request you all to think of one challenge that you think you're facing and see how you can change that into an opportunity for yourself. Before we do that, let's see what research has to say. So in a developed country like USA, according to Center for Disease Control and Prevention, it was estimated that 1 out of every 6 child in US has developmental disability. Also, there is a shortage of teachers, certified professionals to handle them. Also, in a developing country like India, it's seen, according to the census of 2011, 27 million people are living with disability. And we need close to 1.5 million special educators to actually handle these children, their needs. There are also reasons like lack of trained professionals, general awareness, ignorance among parents and educators and other stakeholders. The most important thing is that today the parents of children without disability, or maybe who don't understand what the needs, special needs are like, have a problem, in inclusion. So we have to fight the myth. We have to convert their attitude towards this. So that's what we'll be doing now. We'll be looking into challenges and seeing how can we turn them into opportunities for us. So let's see, with the first one, what positive difference can we make for ignorance? You all will agree, I'm sure, and you will be having examples in your mind wherein you know that how ignorance from the stakeholders and maybe the parents, teachers, even students in the classroom leads to so much of difficulty, for you to actually suggest strategies or do your intervention in school, right? So what do you do then? Use psychoeducation. Psychoeducation will definitely become your weapon or a tool. All you have to do is that educate people as much as you can. Highlight the needs, the special needs, what are the different challenges that the children are facing. Talk about this to teachers. Ask the authorities to give you one chance wherein you can meet the teachers, do induction programs. When you highlight these red flags, when you, empower your teachers with strategies. So when, when a stakeholder feels empowered, I'm sure they are in a situation, they are in a situation wherein they can handle, the problems in a better way. And they definitely want to give it a try. I remember there's this example that I want to share with you all. That in one of the schools that I was working, there was a child who would always run around in the class. So being a new setup even for the child, the teachers thought maybe it's a behavioral problem because it continued for good amount of time. As expected, the child was referred to the department. Now, when the department went for the observation, they realized, and after the observation, they did interact with the child for a couple of times. They realized that this child was a kinesthetic learner. He had this need of movement to learn. So he would just run around in the class. That doesn't stop him from paying attention to what the teacher was doing. But he wasn't included because it was assumed that yes, he isn't moving and he's not a part of the class. So the children were, briefed about his need. The teacher was asked to accommodate few strategies. Like, for example, if the class was about birds or animals, he was given an origami sheet or maybe a worksheet which he could color. So with that movement, his need for running around became less, and he did participate in the class. He raised his hand to even answer. So see how beautifully when you educate someone, the ignorance gets away, and then they are in a state to help. Isn't that? I'm sure you will be having beautiful examples too. Let's see what the next barrier comes, in our way of setting up the department. It's the space, physical barrier, right? We all may feel the space that you already have isn't enough, or you may feel, you don't have a space at all. But this shouldn't boggle us down. What instead we should do is whatever kind of space you've given, as far as you are in the school, you can make a difference. Go ahead, conduct your sessions, maybe in that one small corner which is allotted, maybe in the library, maybe in the classroom that's given to you. Make the place as inviting as you can in terms of your tools, maybe your techniques, maybe your rapport with the child. Just go on and conduct the session. Sooner or later, when you get space, get into all the details that we discussed before. Make your space as child-friendly, as intervention-friendly as you can. Think of innovative space ideas. Sometimes I remember you are all set in your resource room, okay? You have all your tools ready, you have your worksheet ready, you have something, a game waiting for the child, but the child comes with no mood to sit in the room. The child just wants to get away and runs, goes out of the resource room. What do? Will you waste your time, that important, precious 40 minutes, 30 minutes, which is allotted to you, or you will, change your plan? All right, get innovative, run after the child, maybe go outside, maybe even the playground. Just sit with the child and convert or divert your goal a little. Maybe you can do something else with the child today, what not you had thought of. See if you can, impart something else. This is where creativity comes. Make your plan a little creative, change it to the need of the child, and see if you can reach out. So now we'll see the next difficulty that we face, logistics. Logistics can be in terms of number of people. You may have a small team size, you may not have the kind of professionals that you want in your school, or it can be also in terms of money, the budget that's allotted. Maybe it's really little and you are just not able to do much with it. What can we do, right, about it? Let's see. So let's discuss first the resource. Okay, if you don't think you have too many professionals and there is a lot of caseload, what one can do is maybe you can just begin with observations. Maybe you can call teachers of, have a meeting with teachers or parents, draft strategies which can easily be done in the classroom. Okay, give them techniques that can be accommodated, which can be used in the classroom. Of course, there'll be a lot of ifs and buts there too, but yes, do your best. Give them something that can be easily done in the class, doable, strategies. With the parents, maybe you can call them, highlight the strength of the child beautifully, and then give them the areas that the child is weak or poor in, and then give them strategies. And maybe you can start asking the parents to bring, use the strategy back home, what you've suggested. And then as in when you have less cases, or maybe you have more professionals added in the team, you can start taking more sessions. You can have more children coming to the department. If not, you can also suggest the parents to start therapy outside. See, because we understand how important is intervention, we cannot waste the time of the child. See, sooner or later, the schools will accommodate, more space for the resource room. I totally believe in that. But until then, we cannot waste a child's precious time, which he can be beautifully utilized. So do suggest techniques to teachers, do suggest strategies to parents, and maybe intervention outside. Keep a track on whatever the child is doing outside. Conduct meetings, if not sessions, so that yes, this something is happening with the child. Okay, before we move on to that, I think yes. All right, we will see logistic issues in case of money. All right, so what one can do is that you can suggest efficient and effective learning techniques instead of something which is too expensive, like we have the universal design learning. So you can give them techniques that easily help teachers change the tools, maybe the teaching aids, maybe the lesson plan, because this will make the world of education very different for the diverse learners. For example, the need for shadow teacher, if there is any for one of the child for small reason, can be avoided if the teacher is ready to accommodate. Or maybe you can visit the class in that one difficult period and then maybe just be around to see if you can help the teacher for 15 minutes or so. So these are the ways you can cater to the needs of the children without bothering too much about the logistics. The next one is the attitude. There'll be a lot of negative attitude from most of the stakeholders or some of the stakeholders around you. What you can do with it, how will you fight this hurdle, is by shifting their approaches. Use all the techniques that you're good at. Conduct workshops, conduct community programs, or maybe take permission from the department to have meetings in small numbers with parents and teachers, and explain them the need of intervention. Explain them what are the difficulties that these children are facing. So once you change the attitude, half your battle is won. So you will have to work hard on this, I'm sure, but there are a lot of people working on it. So sooner or later, we will see the difference. The next one is the inadequate resources. Yes, sometimes you may have a new case, that you've never worked on before, a new area of difficulty, or sometimes, what you have isn't enough. You still want to look for resources, maybe more books, maybe more worksheets, maybe more techniques. So what you can do is switch to technology. Today, like we see, because of the pandemic, we all have seen that there's a lot that technology can do for us. There's a lot that they can help us with. Refer to technology, refer to platforms like Ability. There are a lot of resources that will make that will help you and make your intervention superior. It'll bring a change. It'll give you new diverse ideas. Lack of parent support and school support is something that we all face. And I'm sure from the poll, we also realize that, yes, there is a lack of support from the parent and the school side, but it is everywhere. It is a common problem. What can help you is your own intervention. See, when you intervene a child, even if it's like, say, a child needs thrice a week, the parent doesn't agree, the parent agrees just once a week. Begin your session when slowly and steadily the parent sees that, yes, there is a difference in this particular area that you've worked on. The parent may agree for more sessions and the child may come frequently to you. Same with the school, if there are sometimes, a parent doesn't want the child to come to the department because of the fear of labeling or tagging. So use, psychoeducation, maybe use the people who are more keen towards inclusion. Like you will have people who support inclusion in your own setup, in your own school. Use them as a medium. Speak to the parents, make sure that the parent agrees at least for some amount of time. Do therapy, use techniques that will work with the child, and show them a difference. Once you do that, you will see that yes, the support starts flowing in. There'll be times when you feel there's no guidance in setting up. I felt the same. So there's, most of us will do that because theory is something and, your practical experience is something. So when you join a setup to genuinely help a school or, work for children, there'll be times when you'll be lost. You wouldn't know where to start from. I think that's the very reason why we have a beautiful program like this, who's, they've supported right from the beginning till the end, as in how do you set up a beautiful department like a school student support department in school. Having said that, you can begin with anything small that you have. Small space, small resources, small number of kids, small parent support, whatever you have, begin with that. All right. And you can also look for other platforms wherein you can get guidance. There are a lot of social support now, as in you'll have platforms on different social media setup. You can have your own forums. You can join the forums and groups and look for support and guidance from those groups. Non-facilitative and unresponsive environment, more or less, yes, it is like, rigid people and rigid, system that we all are a part of. Even with reforms in education, we are seeing such beautiful changes, but yes, we definitely need a department like this to, regulate and make everything easy for all of them to understand. So what you can do as a therapist or an educator is that you can become adaptive, adapt to whatever setup you're working with, adapt to how the school functions to some bit so that they can also adapt to yours. Okay. And also try and accommodate, like, if you're not given a room, like I said, begin from wherever you can. If there are no support staff, ask, present your demand in a way that they understand that yes, it is something which is necessary for the benefit of the child. So you start becoming adaptive and accommodative is something that I'll say, don't give up, because if you give up, there's that's the end of it. So don't give up, continue, and please do something, whatever big or small that you can. Okay, having said that, the next one is, I'll wind up saying that, yes, human thoughts, are always there, they're floating. We knowingly or unknowingly think and make judgments. For example, you may feel ADHD is something that you cannot handle, or maybe you'll feel that, oh, autism, oh, I have never practiced, so maybe I need a lot of theory for it. So, and sometimes, the teacher's attitude, the parent's attitude, no, my child cannot have, So what is seen is that the way you think is the way you feel, right? If you see the triangle here, you'll understand the way you think is the way you feel, okay? It generates the feelings and emotions in you. And once the way you feel is the way you act. Let's see an example here. There's this scenario wherein a teacher maybe has this thought that John is going to ruin my class again. All right. How does she feel? She feels angry. She feels resentful. She feels powerless. So what do you think she'll end up doing? She'll maybe yell. She'll maybe throw John out of the class. So what you can do is control your thought that very minute there. If you have the power, and we all have, as human beings, we all have the power to change our own thoughts. So if you change your thoughts, okay, for example, here, if you feel, okay, John is having a hard time, maybe I can help him. Okay, maybe let me help. So if you already have empathized with the child, the child is having a hard time, you feel empathized, you feel powerful, you feel calm. So how would you act? You will definitely speak calmly, you will speak privately and offer assistance to the child. So this is the power of thought. So all of you who feel dejected, demotivated, please control your thoughts then and there. The more you feel good about your work, about yourself, the more you would want to do, your actions will talk. So now that we've seen the challenges, we've also discussed few of our challenges, along with how can we change them into opportunities for us. I will definitely remind you all again to think of some challenge that you're facing and see how can you, convert that into an opportunity for yourself. Start small, start from one challenge at a time. Maybe you'll succeed. I'm sure you will. So now where can we start from? Start from, like I said, small, okay? Don't give up. All you need, other than whatever we've discussed, is something which is complementary. I would say all you need is a heart and a will. If you have the heart and the will, definitely you will succeed. So now we'll have Shivani, who will help us understand how can we, in this changing times, in these difficult times, change our sessions, make them virtual for the benefit of our children.
Thank you, Smita ma'am, for taking us through the challenges and the opportunities. Now, what we'll look into is we'll be looking into when a person is facing challenges in the virtual learning setup. So when we talk about the virtual learning setup, what could be the certain challenges? What are the requisites when we are in the virtual learning setup? So we'll first look at the virtual student support services. What are the requisites? As we saw that there's a resource room requisite, there's documentation, record maintenance, certain psychoeducational games. So now let us see what are the requisites for a virtual student support service department. The most important thing is to have a high-speed, reliable internet connection, well-maintained laptop or desktop computer, a good quality headset, a video software. It is very important that when we are taking sessions specifically for children with special needs, we insist on the video to be turned on, video of the facilitator as well as video of the child, so that you can keep a track of whether the child is engaged with you and not distracted by the surrounding. A quiet private area to conduct a session is essential from both the side of the therapist or the special educator counselor as well as from the child side. Now, we'll discuss about certain strategies and tips that could help you to have a smooth virtual session. So as discussed, the first point would be as to how we have to have a quiet private area. So when we have to talk about the child, when you're conducting a session, the side of both the child as well as the therapist is to be calm. Why is it to be calm? So that the focus is only on each other and not to be distracted by the things happening around. So if the child sometimes loses focus, it becomes difficult to get the child back into action. You can use downloaded audio or video clips to keep the child engaged. You can create activities out of it. For example, you have a YouTube video with subtitles, very easy sentences. You can ask the child, okay, the subtitle line is given. Can you figure out where the word starting with C is? Can you tell me what that word is? So such engaging activities will help the child to be hooked on. You can keep materials ready for the session goals. So whenever we plan an activity or we are going to do certain, for example, you have to do a fine motor skill activity and you need clay dough or something from the child's end, or you need to imitate that to the child. So keep every material that is needed handy. Communicate that to the parent as well so that the time is not wasted during the sessions. Another essential thing is to plan a structured session. It is very, very important to plan priorly. So the moment you plan, you know what are you going to work upon, what are your goals for that particular session. Always start with a recap of what has happened in the previous session with the child so that you know that, okay, the child remembers. Then we move on to a new concept and then we get into the, after the session is done, we summarize with the child that, okay, so and so has been learned for the day. So you plan a very structured session where you focus on their skill deficits, where you focus on their cognitive skills, their reading skills, or their arithmetic skills based on the need of the child. Remember to use a multisensory and multimodality approach where you're using the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile techniques together. Then we also have the other strategies and tips where we talk about how essential it is to build rapport. Rapport building is one thing that is very, very important for any child, whether you're taking a counseling session, whether you're interacting with parents, or whether you need to help a child with special needs. Rapport building goes a long way. If you have built rapport, The child would be more interested in what you're doing. The child would be reciprocative of what you want him or her to do. So it's extremely important to build rapport with children. So start off with rapport building. There are times rapport building may take time. Give it the required time. It is very, very important. There are times that the child has no rapport, child is not opening up. We are giving worksheets and worksheets. It gets tedious and it is not recommended that way. So rapport building is very important. Then we move on to something you can provide home assignment. So if you feel that the child is loving to do a particular task with you or is finding certain activity engaging, you can take the help of the parent, twist a little or make it a little level higher where the child can do it at home and come back for the next class. Or there are times a child needs a lot of practice. That, okay, if I've taught a particular sound, that sound needs to be practiced. That can also be given as a home assignment. As discussed earlier, providing reinforcements and rewards is very important. It's a part of the resource room as well, where you can have stamps and stickers. Do not make it into tangible goods where it's only a simple verbal phrase that will also act as a motivation factor to children, a feel good that, okay, yes, I am hearing good things about the work I have done. And a very important thing to remember is when you're working for children with special needs specifically, do not always look at the outcome per se. Look at the journey that the child is taking. Sometimes the child might not be reaching at the outcome or the desired goal that you have set, but the child has put in the effort. Appreciate the child for the effort that he or she has put in. So that helps to again build a better rapport as well. Have an interactive session plan. So when we are having an interactive session plan where there is a two-way communication, the child also feels involved. It is not just one-sided where it feels like, okay, only instructions are being given. So it becomes extremely important that you incorporate a two-way communication. Ask the child what he or she has understood. Can they give examples from their end? Can they try out new things? Or you just play energizers in between where the child feels much more engaged. Another essential tip is to use appropriate background and filters. There are times our background overpowers what we are talking or overpowers us, overshadows us. So it's very, very important that we use appropriate background. There are times we have a lot of colorful backgrounds, but that could be a distraction. Very important that we use calm, subtle backgrounds where the focus remains on you while working with children. Even for children, they might find it very fascinating. Okay, I have umbrellas behind me, I have a beach background behind me. Yes, for a while it is okay, but ask them also to shift to a calm background where they do not get distracted and the major focus is on the topic or on what you are teaching. And when we have spoken about those forms could be created as a means of documentation through Google Forms or type forms. So you could use that forms and circulate around the department and everybody would know what is happening with a particular child. Every observations could be put there by different subject teachers. So that's how everybody could collaborate and help in the virtual setting for children. So now, after having said whether it is a physical department in a school or the virtual department, what does the success of this department depend upon? So there are certain things that the success of this department depends upon. As professionals of the department or working in this department, it's very important to aim for achievable objectives. Being really realistic of the goals that are set. Realistic expectations have to be there and we have to aim for those rather than unachievable objectives. Select evidence-based practices while working with children. Essential would be where you are regularizing the assessments, you're following up with every stakeholder to see the progress the child has made, and also take feedback from different stakeholders about children who are involved and taking necessary support from the department. As professionals of the department, another important thing is to update skills, learn new techniques and approaches to support children with special needs. So learning is an ongoing process. When we are working for children with special needs, in that every child is going to have unique needs. No two children would have the same level of difficulty or same need. Maybe, but the way they acquire or learn would again differ. So at that point of time, it's very important for professionals to learn the new techniques that are upcoming and new researches in the field they need to update themselves with to support these children much better. Another success factor is to seek support of the school management and authorities. Keep them in the loop. Take their help if you need to make certain modification and accommodations for these children. Seeking cooperation from stakeholders is very, very important. See, the child is at the center. The child is the heart of the department, and the parent, the school management, the special educators, counselors, all of them have the same goal where we are working for the holistic development of the child. And the success of it, where you see the child progressing, would depend only when all of them, like the parents, the staff, the management, the special educators, counselors, work hand in hand. So it is very important to seek cooperation from stakeholders to help children progress. So these are certain success factors to have a functional student support services department in a school. Now, to sum up, education is a powerful instrument of social change. I'm sure all of you would agree that it brings about a social change, and it's a powerful instrument of that. And schools are institutions that bridge the gap between different sections of society. And now special needs is also a section of the society. So the schools are going to bring all of them on one plate. And special education needs, how they are being catered to, definitely depends upon the school's adaptations. And with having the student support services department in schools, a positive change definitely will get structured where there's equalization of opportunities for all children. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, both Smita ma'am as well as Shivani ma'am. We had a lot of informative learning from your session and also practical way to relate to it in our practices. Before we begin with the Q&A session for today, I'd like to take the participants through a few things. Smita ma'am, if you could stop sharing. Thank you so much. So participants, I'd like to take you all through our upcoming workshops. As you all know, as part of our Module 3, Workshop 4 is on the gaining parental acceptance and support, which will be conducted by Dr. Mary Grace Gomez, which will happen on the 28th of October, following which we would begin with our Module 4, Workshop number 1, which would be talking about the introduction to academic challenges, part 1, conducted by Madam Geeta Gopi N on the 9th of November. The time for both the workshops are 4 p.m. Indian time, 5:30 p.m. Indonesian time, 6:30 p.m. Singapore and Philippines time. If you're interested for this workshop, do check out the link that's being shared right now in the chat box and register yourself for the workshop that is of interest to you. And also, don't forget to share the link with anyone who you think would benefit from it. Moving on, I'll also now take you all through how is that you can register for each of the event. All you have to do is create an Ability account. And after creating an Ability account, you would become an Ability Premium member. And all you have to do is find the workshop that is of interest to you and go and click on this register for this event button. And you will be able to register for the event. Not only that, once you register for the event, you will be able to pose the question to the speaker directly. And remember, the questions that gets the most upvote would be the one that would be preferred by the speaker for answering. If you don't have any question, try and upvote the question of another participant who you feel are in similar lines. Following this, as you also know, members who are there with Ability for a very long time, as part of each of the workshops that you attend, you'll also be getting exclusive resources that are crafted by experts along with the team members in Ability. Do have a look at all the resources that are being shared as part of today's workshop. As Smita ma'am took you through the different forms that are there in terms of your informed consent, your referral forms, all of that is being shared with all of you. Do check the link out that's being shared right now in the chat box and let us know how effective this resource was for you by liking, by posting your comment and sharing the resource with fellow friends and colleagues. Moving on, you'd also be able to find related events in the related event tabs to find the events that is of interest to you. Not only that, to keep a track of all the events that you've attended with Ability, you will be able to find all of them at one place in your My Events section. How simple and easy is that? With one platform, you can do everything. Now, I'll also introduce you all to our Ability Resource Creator platform. If you are a person who has been creating or curating resources, this is in scope and avenue for you. All you have to do is create or curate resources in the domain of special education and share this with over 40,000 educators and parents through our platform. You would receive their following of your profile by creating a profile, and you will get their following on it. And you will also receive a direct feedback and rating from the community members to let them know how effective this resource has been for them. Following this, we also have launched a very new initiative on the Ability Inclusion Champion, which is a community-driven initiative. In this, by becoming an inclusion champion for your city, you would be able to gain access to free and amazing resource tools that you can share with your community members. And you will also be able to run local and offline and as well as online support groups with your community members and lead initiatives to spread awareness on topics with that of special education and also connect with people who are of similar interest at global levels. We have about 100 plus volunteers who have taken their steps to become an inclusion champion. If you're interested to become an Ability Inclusion Champion or interested to become our premium resource creator, do check the link out that's being shared right now in the chat box and register your interest. Our team will definitely get in touch with you. Now, let's begin with our Q&A segment for today. Ma'am, are you ready? Do I have both Shivani ma'am and Smita ma'am with us? Yes.
Yes.
So, ma'am, yeah. So let's begin with the first question. The first question is from Ms. Asha and Caroline, who wants to know that you spoke about the prerequisites for the department, to setting up the department, Smita ma'am. You spoke specifically in detail about the different qualifications that are required. So we have a question on that line, which is specific to understanding what are the different kind of professionals who would be working in the department? Is it just limited to special educators and counselors, or people from diverse background can also work? What is your take on it?
Sure, I'll answer that. While even Shivani discussed the core members of the team, we did highlight the people, the different therapists who can be associated with the department. So like we said, just to begin the department, a basic counselor or a special educator can begin the department. Again, it totally depends on the kind of cases that you have in the school. So, a counselor can definitely start the department. The other therapists who can be a part of the team are, we can have more than 1, 2, 3 special educators, more counselors. We can also have speech therapist. We can have even physiotherapist and an occupational therapist, a phonic teacher. See, it totally depends on the setup of the school and how much are they ready to accommodate. So like I said, this department works in a very structured way, but there's no, there's no defined guide, that yes, this department cannot start if you don't have this professional, or the department cannot expand and include these professionals. So please go ahead. It all totally depends on the school. It depends on the kind of children you're catering to. So if you have like too many pre-primary children and you have like a lot of children struggling with phonics, again, not because of, any other reason, it's because of maybe learning disability, maybe difficulty in understanding, maybe they have auditory processing or other difficulties. Yes, that's when maybe we can even include a phonic teacher, take her help, have extra sessions, while because the phonic teacher may use a different technique, with the help of the special educator, maybe reach out to the child in a different way and make sure that the child learn these basic skills. Do you want to add anything, Shivani?
No, you've covered everything. It depends completely on the need of the school and how many students are a part of the school. And then once the department is started by 1 or 2 professionals, it definitely keeps growing.
Thank you so much for both your insights. I'm sure it basically depends on the needs of the children per se, which the school is catering to. Next, on similar lines, we have a question from Ms. Subrata, who wants to know what is the ideal ratio of special educators and counselors for each student. If you could both share your perspective and your take on it, that would be very helpful to the community.
Sure. For special educators, maybe I can comment that yes, a lot, there's no number which is defined as such, but if you have cases that are not very severe, okay, the tier of the child isn't high, so you can accommodate, say, like 10 cases, 12 cases. It also depends on how comfortable is the child in a group session, or does the, do the children need one-on-one session? So if you have too many one-on-one session, and if you have severe challenges, maybe then you may not be able, you cannot do justice to many children, you can accommodate them, maybe you can make an IP, but when it comes to execution, when it comes to, your observations, spending that amount of time in understanding the challenges, making your resources, you will definitely struggle there, then So it's always advisable to have a number which one can handle. If there are too many cases, it's good to include more special educators, or like I said in the beginning, if the school cannot afford more or is not in a state right now to have many, they can outsource services, use special educators, refer the parents to someone who can do therapy outside. So that way the caseload will become. Yes, and for counselors, maybe Shivani can comment on that.
When we come to the counselors per se, the counseling sessions are not held every day. Definitely, we give a reflection time to the child to, reflect back, practice on the homework assignments, and then come back for the other counseling session. So it's ideally a counselor is there for 1:50, but 50 are the cases, probably 25 to 50. Again, it depends on the severity level. There's no fixed ratio. In a school, probably there's a strength of 1500, but the students who require support may only be 100 to 200. That time, the number would be different. On the other hand, the strength of the school would just be 800 students, but those who require help would be more like 175. That's when the ratio would again differ. So it's very, very important to keep in mind what is the severity level of the children that we are catering to, how frequently are sessions needed by them, and if it starts off with one each, is that person able to handle? It's very important for the school management also to ensure that there's no burnout of the staff. So you also need to ensure that we do not overburden ourselves while working, because as Smita ma'am said, getting resources ready and ensuring that the child is getting the needed support as per the level is extremely important. So the ratio completely depends upon the number of students who require the help and also the severity.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing both your insights. Next, we have a question from Ms. Parvita and Mary, who wants to know, specifically, I'll pose this question to Ms. Smita, ma'am. They want to know, like, children with special needs try a lot to fit in the world and the interest of neurotypical children, just to mingle with them, because they're all part of the neurotypical children gang in the larger classroom setting. But sometimes this transition is not very smooth and they're not accepted as part of the neurotypical children's group. So this tend to have an impact on both your self-confidence and also the mental health, right? So what can be done in such cases, especially as teachers or parents? What orientation can be provided to support and help this children's transition to be a little better or smoother?
Sure, it's a very nice question. Definitely everybody in school needs attention, right? I mean, all children, forget about school. We all want to definitely get some recognition from people we are with, right? Be it at workplace, be in school or at home. So especially with children who have difficulties, because they are not looked at from the, from the regular, way, the way the other children are looked at, it becomes even more difficult for them to actually mingle. So sometimes it's seen in the classrooms that these children seek attention in a negative way. See, we call it negative because that's not the usual way that a child would communicate or ask, For example, if they need help, maybe they misbehave, maybe they won't let you take your session, they may run around because they feel, nobody's paying attention to my need, I'm not able to understand, nobody's trying to reach out to me. So there are different ways in which they seek attention. With children, maybe they get a bit naughtier, or maybe they try and not be a part of the game, instead, hinder, not let them also play. This is seen sometimes in the sports, they will not let them play or maybe disturb the children who play. This is just not their fault. Like you said, what can be done from our end is, orient not just teachers, parents, but also students. The students are really, open to the idea. All they need is information. So if you impart the right amount of information to the children, no child wants to, be rejected or dejected. So please share the right amount of information. You don't have to teach or, bombard too much of information to the other children. All you have to do is ask them to look in a different way. Maybe they can look at what the child can do and not focus too much on what the child cannot. So once they, maybe a child isn't able to move, but the child definitely can participate in word games or some other challenge, what the children are doing in the class. So highlight their strength. If as a teacher, I model, what I am doing, my children, I'm sure, will notice and try and do the same thing. If I ignore the child with special needs in the class, the children may also do the same. So it's all about what you see is what you do. So what you say is not what they do. So please bring the change in yourself. Reach out to as many children as you can, and you see the children also acting as a support system there. And to the parents, yes, we need to tell parents of all kinds of children that school is not a place where we should bifurcate or keep children in different departments or rooms. They all have to be together. This is for the betterment of the society. I'm sure everybody gains from it. They learn learning, sharing. They have a better self-respect. So yes, that's how you can handle, and make sure that everybody gets equal opportunity in school.
Very well put, ma'am. Teaching them to accept and recognize differences is the key aspect to it. Next, we have a question from Ms. Mirsha. I'll pose this question to Ms. Shivani. So what are the things that educators need to keep in mind while schedule a meeting with a parent? Because you talk about the importance of collaboration with diverse stakeholders, right? So how is that we can conduct a successful parent-teacher meeting?
Wonderful question, I must say, because that is where the way you interact with the parent has much to do with how the parent is going to take care of the child. So very important thing here is to build rapport. As you build a rapport with the child, it is very, very important to build rapport with the parent as well. So when the parent comes to you, what is the key? You do not start off by saying, okay, these are the limitations your child has. So at that point of time, we definitely know that, yes, there are certain agenda that, okay, these are the certain challenges the child is facing, and we need to convey it to the parent, but at the time where you feel it's right. So very important, you start off by having a rapport, figure out how the child is with them, how is the child at home, are there any challenges the parent is facing. Speak about the child's strengths, speak about the child's potential, make the parent feel good about the child, and then say, we understand, yes, your child is excelling in sports, your child is doing so good in these aspects. How would it be if we work on these aspects as well? Like if a child has an academic limitation, we could put across like, he does wonderful in sports. Let's work hand in hand to support your child in the academics. So the moment you use the word, let's work hand in hand, or we'll support the child together, so the parent also feels at ease that I'm not left alone here. So I have somebody to help me and show me a way ahead. At the same time, when you're talking to parents about the challenges, give them one or two strategies and tips as well, so they can practice with the child at home. And there are times they'll panic, okay, what is this, you're asking me to go for a formal assessment, you need to tell them and calm them down first. Only once they leave your room with a calm mindset and with a, an open kind of an attitude, it will be beneficial. Please do not leave the parents where they have not been with you on the same page. Give them some time. It definitely takes time, but start off always with building a good rapport, greeting them, talking about the strengths, and then asking, how can we collaboratively work on the challenges and limitations?
Wonderful, ma'am. So building rapport is the key to go about it, and clarifying all their doubts, even if it is taking a long time, that's very, very essential to building rapport. Next, we have a question from Ms. Marlio Lango. I'd like to take both your perspectives on it. If a child is taking sessions in the school, let's say special education or remedial or counseling session, is it still important for the child to go for external therapy? What is your take on it?
It's sometimes yes and sometimes no. So again, if the child just needs, like, say, intervention in one of the area or two odd areas, and it can be easily managed in school, then there isn't any need for the child to go for any kind of intervention outside. It saves a lot of time and a lot of money also. And it definitely stops, it helps the parent. We are not here to trouble them. We are here to support them. So whenever, a therapist suggests any kind of intervention outside, there has to be a reason for it. Sometimes the reason can be the child needs multiple sessions, like say every day the child needs some kind of, work that needs to be done, some intervention to happen. And it cannot be accommodated in a school setup because you also are there to look after the other children, to handle their needs. So the child can be accommodated in the school maybe twice or thrice a week, depending on the number of cases one has. And then for the rest of the sessions, or the child can be suggested something outside. Even a small help from a tuition teacher or maybe a parent who can go as by your IP, your suggested techniques, your suggested worksheets can help. Sometimes you need therapy or intervention in different area, like, maybe a child needs a therapist, which a school isn't able to provide right now at the moment. So yes, then you definitely suggest intervention outside. Like I said, the most important thing is to help the child gain as much as the child can and not waste any time. So our limitations, the school's limitation is one thing, but yes, if the child can afford and if there are services, please do suggest. It's always for the betterment of the child. Yes, Shivani.
Thank you so much for that insight, Smita ma'am. To add on to, yes, it's very important to decide based on the need. But in case if the child is also taking sessions outside, please be mindful that the therapists are going hand in hand. It shouldn't be that, okay, at school, the therapist is teaching another sounds per se, and the other therapist outside school is taking the other sound. So the child gets confused. Okay, am I supposed to learn this way or am I supposed to learn that way? So it's important to be mindful that whatever we do, everybody works hand in hand and on the same page to support the child. There are times the school can only provide 2 days a week, but the child needs 4 days a week, or the child needs everyday stimulation. So it is a need that the child has to take support from external services. But again, it is important that the IEP matches and everybody works hand in hand to support the child for their holistic development.
Thank you for both your lovely insights. Next, we have a question from Ms. Lata Joshi, which is very specific to the resource room that Smita ma'am discussed about. So I'll pose this question to Smita ma'am first. So she asked, is resource room a separate part from the classroom and SSD, or it's a entity which is associated with your SSD? How is it? Because in your country, they don't have a clear demarcation. So what constitutes a resource room and how separate is it from the classroom and the SSD? If you can share some insights on it.
Sure. So what happens is the resource room, okay, as we call it, maybe different places, different schools have different names or, different label to, they call it in a different way. Sometimes it's also called as personalized learning center. Sometimes it's called as a resource room. Sometimes we label it as student support service department or just a counselor's room in, most of the areas. So there's in whatever way it's called, all we have to make sure is that this word should be understood and taken in a very positive way, because the essence of the department, like Shivani had highlighted in the beginning, is to spread positivity. It's to delete all the negative connotations and anything that's associated with special eds. Coming to if it's the part of the school, yes, it's highlighted in the beginning, it is a hub. So now why we calling it a hub is that we've seen the entire journey, like from the segregation to these children put in different schools to finally we've reached inclusion. So the idea of the inclusion here is to keep them in school, all right, making them a part of everything that we can, all activities that we can. Major classroom sessions should also be tried and conducted in the classroom. So when we say a resource room, SSSD, these kind of, we call a child here only during the periods we think, maybe a time when the child needs a support. So the child can be trained for that amount of time in the rooms here. The idea is to generalize, whatever we are teaching here in the resource room needs to be generalized, and we'll see to it that the child is able to do the activity or the skill on his or own in the classroom. So that's what it is. It is not, we don't have to segregate it from the school. Like the other departments, we have a sport department, we have, art and craft, we have the music department. We also have a special department in the school. So they will just look into the needs of the children, in depth, maybe a little more than what the others do, but try and be a part of this department. So everybody is invited. Like she said, highlighted in the beginning, we have to be in loop. Only when we work as a team can we see the growth.
Very nicely put, ma'am. How we have different departments like the sports and everything. The SSD would cater to the psycho-emotional needs and the social needs of children for their holistic development per se. That's a nice take to it. Next, we have a question from Ms. Namrata Saho, who wants to know something with regard to virtual sessions. So I'll pose this question to Ms. Shivani. So what do you think is the ideal group size while taking virtual sessions, especially when we have children with special needs in a classroom and also individualized sessions? What is the ideal size of a group session?
Okay. So if a special educator has to take a group session online, it completely again depends. So there might be children who are having issues with spelling. So all of them can be clubbed together at one time, but group size, I would say 1:5 is maximum. Again, because in the virtual setting, it gets very, very difficult to keep a tab on all children. Sometimes you see them switching off their camera, not responding to you. But for the child to be able to get the maximum out of your teachings, I would suggest 1:5. But always it's better to have at least, even if it's a 1:5 ratio, cater 10 minutes each individually, so that you also understand how much the child has understood from your teachings. So that way, even if you have a group size more, at least ensure that you have certain questions posed to a particular child to understand how the child is progressing. So it's very important to know how much the child has learned from you during that session. So 1:5 in a virtual setup for special education services is what I would suggest. And when it comes to counseling, yes, to maintain confidentiality and all, it is definitely done 1:1. But there are instances like bullying or the students not listening or not adhering to the classroom etiquettes and virtual rules and regulations. Definitely a group session would help.
Thank you for sharing the insights, ma'am. Next, we have a question from Ms. Rukshana, who wants to know, you mentioned about the psychoeducational games. Could you brief on what are the different psychoeducational games that are there and what is its purpose? Either one of you could answer first.
All right. There are certain, areas that can be really worked on with the help of these games. There are a lot of games one can accommodate in their room. So when we say psychoeducational game, there are board games. There are, games online available. With technology, we also have a lot of apps available these days. So when you accommodate these games, for example, coming to board game, you have games like Boggle, or you have Scramble, or you even have games like Snakes and Ladders. So when you're trying to teach them counting, skip counting, or when you're trying to, for a game like Twister. Okay, so when you're trying to teach a child body movement and the right, the left orientation and all that, definitely these psychoeducational games help. So if you have a difficulty in understanding, what you can do is maybe every board game has the skill that they help a child develop. So if you refer to the skill, you will see that yes, these are the areas. For example, perception of the child will improve. Is it visual perception? Is it auditory? There are sometimes, which tell you the creative skill of the child. Some help you with logic, some help you with numbers. So any game that you choose should definitely match with what goal that you're working on. And you can keep those games or maybe borrow them from the library and use it for the child. A lot of preschoolers also need, so because as a practice, sometimes we don't conduct session with the preschoolers, but maybe what we can do is introduce them to a concept through games. So even they become your psychoeducational games. Like you can have blocks, you can have, the circles, the rings, which you can stack. So you can have vegetables, colors that can be, differentiated. You can teach them sorting. You can teach them a lot of activities through this. So the term is a bit different, but it is definitely everything that we've seen in regular classrooms. When it comes to special education, we use it in a very, structured way. We use it considering the strength of the child. So if the child gets distracted too much with these aids, maybe we will not use the psychoeducational games. Instead, we'll focus on something that is more handy. Maybe the child is able to pay attention or focus attention on. So this is how we will be using the psychoeducational games.
Thank you so much for your insights, ma'am. Next, we have a question from Ms. Kritika, who wants to know that she's about to begin a journey as an intern with a school for counseling. So she was interested to do group sessions where she's trying to understand the needs of children, especially in the teenage years. So she wants to know, are there any other ways that she can engage them to understand what their needs are and cater to them? So Shivani ma'am, if you could share more lights on it from the counseling perspective.
Sure. So yes. So when we talk about how group sessions could be a part of the department, so here what she could do is, it is very important while working with students, first build a rapport, talk to them generally. You can play energizers. And then through social stories or something, you build rapport and then take them onto the topic that you would like to discuss with them. So a way is, again, you build a rapport, you ask them their thoughts, always make it a two-way communication. Ask them their thoughts about what you want to do, how you want to build a rapport, how do you want to take things ahead. Ask children as to how are they liking the school environment, general questions where they also feel at place and they understand that you're not here to lecture them, where you're building a bond with them, and that's how you begin up with.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Next, we have some set of questions from our participants, different participants like Moonseen and multiple others who wants to know how is that they can initiate the conversation of the importance of an inclusive education to the principal or management, especially being a teacher or a special educators. Do you have some tips for them?
Yes, if you, this is a smart way, I would say, that yes, if you win the heart of the, the head, the authorities of the school, things are half done. So how will you do that? Personally, you can see your work is going to talk for you. If you know what you're doing and you have your goals clear and your techniques in place, definitely sooner or later the department is going to see that it will be appreciated, and you will get a lot of support from them. They understand, most of them today, understand the significance of special needs. They understand that yes, inclusion is the way going ahead. So they are ready for it. What they may have difficulty in is maybe how, how to set up, how to begin, where to start from. So there a help is needed. But again, there are a lot of platforms like the one that we are in right now. There are other ways and means wherein you can, outsource a team which can help you set up the department. There are centers which provide you such services. So maybe you can begin with such things and then take it ahead from there once you're confident that yes, you can run this show on your own. Also, I would say inclusion, can be contagious if we as people in the field talk about positive examples, publicize positive examples. There's nothing like talking about success. So big or small, whatever is your achievement, do share. See, sometimes we feel no, it's just the beginning, maybe it isn't something which will be appreciated. Don't think about it. All we're trying to do is we are publicizing not our efforts, we are publicizing how these efforts are helping children with special needs. So once you begin with positive examples, through word of mouth, through the other channels, definitely it spreads. And like I said, it becomes contagious. Most of them will be ready to listen to you. If you cannot reach out to, I'm sure you'll be having a lot of networking, as in, people who've learned from your guides. Use them, maybe conduct a small meeting between the heads and someone who can definitely talk about the importance and significance along with you, and see if you can take it ahead from there.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Shivani ma'am, can we have your insight as well?
Sure. So when we talk about how, as Smita ma'am said, once the management agrees, it's half done. Always, you have to build about the confidence that it is possible. So you can tell them that it's not necessary to take too many students. We can just start with 1 or 2 students in the inclusion category. And the moment they start seeing you working for it and they realize that it's not that difficult, it can be done. There are times the school management is also worried about how the parents would react if we have such children, or how would the other students react if such children are included in a regular classroom. So as stated earlier, starting small with everything, yes, having a positive mindset, making certain adaptations, and then you could also start off with, okay, let's try with one case who's actually mild. And yes, we have the expertise, we have a counselor in school, we have a special educator. Why not we try with 1 or 2 students, work upon them, and then build on the resources, build on professionals, build on taking in more students. So that way it is important. And as Smita ma'am said, yes, having a positive attitude. Also, if there are already identified special needs student in school, work for them. Let people see that how transformation can happen. But transformation is slow. It is not a magic that, okay, we start working and within 2 days we see that, okay, the child is improving. It takes patience. But yes, if the child is given the right amount of support, definitely the changes will be visible. So you need to tell them that, okay, we are working for the child. We'll see, and progress can be evaluated every 3, 6, 12 months. So definitely at that point of time, when the management also sees change, they are more willing and more adaptive to these kind of changes in the school scenario.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your insights. So starting small, taking the initiative and taking small steps towards the path and having a lot of patience and evaluating the progress is the key aspects to all of it to bring about a change at the larger level. Next, we have a question from Ms. Latika, who wants to know, she understands that the component of consent from parents are very important. But sometimes what happens, certain parents are not ready, even though the child's needs are very severe in nature and the child needs help and support. What can be done on such cases? And also there's an extension question. When parents agree to work on, there are times when they don't take the home based plan very seriously and do not work on it. So what can be done in those situations? If you could both share your perspectives on it.
Can you repeat the first part of the question, Revati?
The first question is, when parents do not agree, though consent is very important, you know, the child's severity is much higher and needs more support. So in that cases, when the parents don't agree, what can be done? What is the next take to it? That's the first question.
Okay. So the consent of the parent, yes, more of like we had discussed, sometimes it's because of the fear of labeling. Sometimes they don't understand how important the concern is, you know, how it's affecting the child. So all you can receive without the consent of the parent, of course, you cannot begin the intervention. But you know, if you know, yes, there is a concern and the parent hasn't agreed, maybe try and reach out through teachers, see if the class teacher has a better rapport with the parent, or maybe if, you know, some other authority in school has better rapport with the parent, if they can put the word across. Sometimes, you know, this is it is a problem and you can handle it in a you know, this fashion. So if you think you cannot, try and use someone who can convince the parent on your behalf. So that's to do with the consent part.
Yes, ma'am. So the next extension question is, when parents do agree for the home-based treatment plan, but they do not follow it on a very serious note, what can be done on such situations?
Okay, so you have to remind them that, you know, you are no magician, and unless and until they support you, things don't work. See, right in the beginning of the intervention, like, you know, when you meet the parent, you have to reinforce this again and again, that I'm here to help, but you know, the child may need these many hours of intervention, and out of these many hours, maybe, like, say, you know, 1/4 or 1/2 the intervention time is done here in school. But yes, what about the rest? You know, so rest will be based on the home plan. So one has to explain them the significance. Okay, you can slowly and steadily, if the child is you know, understands, maybe give them worksheets in a way that the child himself would want to sit and do and bring it back to you, or maybe home you know, do certain tasks which can be managed by the child itself. But yes, through teachers, you know, maybe the entire team, time and again, has to put this to the parent that yes, your child will definitely progress and at a better pace if you cooperate, if you also be a part of the home-based program.
Wonderful insights, ma'am. Shivani ma'am, do you want to add anything addition to it?
Yeah. So when we were speaking about the consent from parents, right? The parents are not ready. Yes, parental involvement and parental consent is the first step, but they are reluctant due to various reasons, that there is no proper awareness of what the condition actually is. There's a lot of stigma attached. Okay, what would my family members say? They wouldn't be ready for my child seeking. Already we are paying so much in the school. So the lack of awareness makes them to react that way. It's very important for a therapist to psycho-educate the parent. Once you make the parent understand what the condition is, and if they're still reluctant, give them certain activities or tips that they can practice at home. Once you have to tell them that yes, they have to be consistent with it. Without being consistent, they won't be seeing any change. So tell them to get involved with the child, spend more time, see that okay, you've practiced these strategies that you're giving. These strategies are not readily available to them, but you as a counselor, special educator, would definitely have certain extra strategies that they can practice at home. So once they do that and get back to you, you ask them how the progress was. Do they see any change? Okay, after that, you also discuss with them that, okay, there's not been a lot of change because you have been doing it, yes, with a supervision of a special educator or counselor. But then if your child would have been seeking direct services, there would have been better improvement. So you need to give the parent time. It shouldn't be too much of a time, but have timely meetings at least every 15 days or 1 month, depending on the severity of the issue that the child is facing. Try, give them space. It shouldn't be like an order that you need to go. You need to make them understand the importance of seeking these services, but at the same time, you need to give them some time to reflect as well. Give them certain materials to read up about the condition, to psychoeducate them, let them understand as to what it is and how things are. Based on that, they could take it ahead from there. And the other part of the question that you had asked was for Revati, if you could help me through that. One was the consent, and the other was about if they are not
Home-based plan.
consistent, right?
Yeah.
Home-based plans, yes, again, collaborative effort. Without that, there's nothing that can be achieved. So the special educators also have to be consistent in providing their services. The student has to put in the regular efforts as well as the parents. So it's a, as I told you, it's a proper interconnected chain of a collaborative effort.
Thank you for emphasizing on the aspect of how everything is linked to one another. Next, let's take the final question for today. I'd like to take both your perspective on it because I think it's very, very important for all the special educators and counselors out there. This question is from Ms. Farida Huzafa, who wants to know, working as a special educator or a counselor and supporting children with special needs day in and day out can at times get to you and become quite tiring. So what are certain personal healthcare or self-care tips that you can practice to maintain your emotional balance both at work as well as even at home?
That's again important question, because we as professionals, we have to be charged all the time to reach out to children in a beautiful way and a better way. So for that, I think take your own time off. It's absolutely okay. You cannot be your best always. So indulge in activities that help you, otherwise, to help you calm down yourself. Read. Sometimes reading, also helps you. Also, the most important thing as a professional in this field is to have expectations which are, realistic. So don't expect too much from yourself. Like we say, we expect too much up from ourselves, and then we may be frustrated too soon. So take small steps, take achievable steps, and also rethink. Always look back at what you're doing, because that will help you see if you are on the right path, and accordingly plan your future steps. And don't give up. Be positive. So please take care of yourself. Like they say, if you are, happy is when you can spread happiness. So do everything that you can to stay happy. Yes, Shivani, please do add something to this.
So it's very, very important, because what happens in this field is, yes, there is so much of pressure that, okay, the children need to improve. You have parental expectations on you. You have your own expectations for the child you're working with. Definitely, there are times where we also feel burned out. But remember, as ma'am said, yes, setting realistic expectations is important. Do not get bogged down. Always remember that if you have given your 100%, that should be your motivation. We cannot control what the involvement of other stakeholders is, but if you give in your 100% to the work you're doing, it will really be helpful. You should be satisfied that, yes, I have from my end given the best to the child to support, but now the follow-up is needed. At that point of time, the follow-up time is where these special educators, counselors, and all get bogged down. But we need to give it time, that yes, and also keep reminding parents that it's essential for follow-up. Celebrate simple joys. If you see that the child is actually showing certain improvement, not as much as you expected, but yes, the effort is being taken, the journey is to be appreciated. And it's very important that you also indulge in self-care. There's a lot of things happening around us. There is pressure from everywhere. We have our own personal lives, we have professional things. Balance between them is important, but taking time out for self-care. Do what you like to do. As ma'am said, you either read a book, listen to music. Very important. Indulge in self-care. Once that is done, you know how to take care of yourself well. You'll be recharged, right? Once you recharge your own battery, you're set for the next day. But do not carry your burdens of today to tomorrow, and that becomes a cycle that can affect you more. So put in your best efforts. Things will fall into place, and wishing you all a very happy journey in helping children.
Very beautifully put about the importance of self-care, especially as professionals in this field. Thank you so much for both the lovely insights from your end, ma'am. I completely enjoyed today's session. I've seen that the feedback link has already been shared in the chat box. I'd request my team members to again drop in the feedback link to let us know how effective this session was for you so that we'll be able to improve the services and the experience for all of you all. And I'll also inform all the members that the recording of today's session as well as the deck would all reach you all. Do not worry about it. And the resources in terms of all the forms that were shared by Smita ma'am will also be shared with you all. The link for the same would be again posted on the group. I'd request my team members to do the needful. Now let me ask the final thoughts and words to both the speakers. Shivani ma'am, share your final thoughts with all our participants today.
It was a wonderful experience. We had different insights. There was a learning for me also. Thank you all for yours. I can see a lot of messages coming up in the chat box. Thank you all for being so patient. And yes, the key message that I would like to give you all is don't worry. Yes, there are a lot of requisites to start off the department, but if you have the heart and the will, take it as a takeaway and you will definitely be making a lot of difference in the lives of children. Stay happy and stay positive.
Wonderful, ma'am. Smita ma'am, your final words to all our participants today.
Definitely. Thank you, Revati. And thanks a lot to Ability for providing such a beautiful platform where we all can reach out to each other, as a team. And definitely, I'm sure everyone who's watching this today or is going to see this in future believes in inclusion. So continue to do that. Do your bit. Every bit that you do is going to make a big difference someday or the other.
Wonderful note to end the session, ma'am. Thank you so much, both speakers, and thank you all participants for actively participating and being engaging throughout today's session. I'd like to again remind you all that we have an upcoming workshop on the module 3, workshop number 4, which is on gaining parental acceptance and support. I think this is an important aspect in today's age because consent is a component that is of crucial importance, which should be conducted by Dr. Mary Grace Gomez, which would happen on the 28th of October, and module 4, which should focus on the academic challenges. We'll have our first workshop on the introduction to academic challenges, part 1 by Madam Geeta Gopi N, which should happen on the 9th of November. All the workshops would happen 4 p.m. Indian time, 5:30 p.m. Indonesian time, and 6:30 p.m. Singapore and Philippine times. Don't forget to register yourself and share the link with anyone who you think would benefit from the workshop. Until we see you for the next time, it's a big bye from Team Ability. Stay safe and take care, all of you.